If you ever miss one of these meetings and you want to know what happened, we will post them to our channel. And if you go back to the meeting invitation, the online meeting, and look for first half or second half of the month, you'll see if you went to the March one, the meeting is posted there from the one we had earlier this month. First order of business is I am going to have a meeting next week or the week after. I'll send a message out as to when I pick the date. This one's late because, as I said, for some of you who were in earlier, I had an eye surgery last week, and unfortunately, I was in recovery and not able to hold a meeting. But I don't want to hold up the next two meetings because I know from the start of the season, most people are very interested in making sure that if they have questions, they can get answers to them. And so, from that perspective, I want to make sure we make ourselves available. So we'll stay on track for first Wednesday and I think it's the third Wednesday of April for dates, so that you can come in and ask any questions. My thought agenda wise here, and this is always very flexible. The traditional premise of this meeting, second March, is to cover the second March lessons, which were installing bees for packages and nucleus, and then the post install first week. Some of you may or may not be familiar with the program. I see there's some new names in here. So just talking about how this works in case it's not evident. Sometimes you come in and sit in on the meeting and I say this and you go, oh, that's how that's supposed to work. So if you go to the homepage for Manage Mentoring, there's two links, first year program, second year program. Click on the first year program link and then click on the month we're in. And the meetings are divided first half, second half. You're supposed to go through the lessons for the first half, and then we will have a meeting like this and discuss that content and any other questions you might have. And then after that meeting, go through the lessons for the second half and come to the second half meeting at the end. We will always open the opportunity for you to ask any questions you have. It's difficult. Ask me how I know. I've been there. To go to a beekeepers meeting for an association where the whole room full of people know what they're doing already, and you're brand new and have 20 questions and can't get an answer to your question because there's just not enough time to get to you. So here you have a safe place. We're always answering questions that you have. And I can tell you through the experience of doing this since 2016, whatever question you have, either the person in the room here would benefit from the answer and or didn't think to ask that question, but probably, again, will benefit from hearing the question be asked and go, oh, that's interesting. What is the answer to that? From that perspective, let me just turn to the March. I'm going to go back to where you should be. And so the premise of this program, if you know what you're doing in beekeeping and you want to get started, a lot of people show up at this time of year and they're rushing through all the stuff that they probably would have been well served if they had known better to start back in January. There's a number of preparatory steps, getting your equipment right, getting your apiary set up, ordering your bees, all that stuff. And a lot of people don't know that it takes a while to do all that stuff. And ideally, if you found us in January and you did all that prep stuff, you're sitting here like BJ, who I was talking to earlier, and just waiting for your bees to come. That's a great place to be. So with that being said, I think some of you may or may not be behind. And from that standpoint, I'll just go back and say that in the February lessons, the game plan was really about ensuring that you got your hives put together right, you painted them, and you made sure you put your order in for your bees. And then the supplementary thing was just giving you a quick heads up on queen rejection risk. I want to say to you that if you're new to the program and you just found us and you didn't get to do those lessons, there's a couple things in there that are timely. You have to paint your boxes before you put your bees in and let them cure, because the smell of the paint curing is a detriment when you put bees in a freshly painted box. So if you're planning to get bees and you don't have your equipment built and painted yet, you should plan to try and do that this weekend to give as much lead time for that paint to dry in anticipation of putting your bees in the box. There's tips about how to paint, fabricate. That was the February lesson. But coming back to March, the reason we plan apiary design and hive placement in March is that's when the weather breaks and you can actually go outside and survey your property and figure out, I need to make space and put my bees here or there. And ideally, those lessons were helpful in giving you some tips in how to set things up. One thing that we reiterate often is our preference from a program standpoint is that you follow the guidance of putting your hives on a single stand and not on a rail, and that you space them far apart so that you can get a tractor through. And that also helps you have more than enough work area around your hive itself. So with that being said, I'm not here to talk to you all night long. I'm here to answer your questions from the perspective of we can go back to February and March, those things I just spoke of. Does anybody have any questions whatsoever about getting bees, hive placement, prepping equipment, things like that? We'd be happy to answer them for you now.
I have a quick
Yes.
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If your hive came pre-waxed on the exterior, do you have to paint it, or can you consider that finished?
Yeah, typically you can consider that finished. When the hives are dipped in wax, they generally will last without having to be painted. In fact, you can't really paint them.
That's what I was figuring. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Is that Grant Styles you're getting them from?
I'm getting my bees from the hives themselves. I ordered online and I did it a while ago, and now I can't remember for the life of me where I got them from, but they're waxed inside and outside.
Okay. The one thing I'll tell you, and I've had wax hives, I tried them just so I could do this, talk about how they work. They work for a period of time. And supposedly the wax is going to protect the wood and give you a good finish. They turn gray, the wax wears off on the exterior, it just doesn't hold. It might come out of the wood somewhat to protect it, but in time you'll get to the point where you feel the hive and it feels like dry wood.
Okay.
You get to that point, you might want to consider painting them. But
yeah.
No, you don't paint them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Got it.
Vanessa?
Hi there. So I have watched all your videos through February. Sorry, I missed the last one. I have a question. So I was gifted like the Mann Lake pre-painted, pre-assembled hive boxes. Is that a sufficient paint coating, or do I need to paint on top of that?
Yeah, my experience with the Mann Lake equipment is pretty good. It's not bad. I will say that they tend to, for some reason, see failures of their bottom boards. They don't last very long. Most of the stuff that you get from a factory like a Mann Lake or any of the other big providers are not painted with a brush. They're painted with a spray gun. And as such, their coating is not as durable. And they might use a more generic paint, where if you went to Home Depot, whatever you bought middle of the road Glidden paint, or even a high-end paint like Benjamin Moore, you'd get more durability. It's kind of your personal preference whether you want to go a little further to protect your equipment. It'll probably last for years, but it won't last as long as if you had done it purposely, with high quality paint. So you'll get through a couple of seasons.
Kevin?
Yeah.
I would consider the Mann Lake paint job a primer.
Yeah, you think so, Russ? I don't know. I've seen them. They last for 2 or 3 seasons.
I think it's a one coat kind of job, and so I would paint it.
Okay. Well, there's Russ from Maryland, who's a master beekeeper, and he's weighed in. I'll be honest with you. I always paint my own stuff just for the purpose of knowing how to do it. And when you go through the lesson of how to paint the hive, you'll see the extent of what I do to paint my boxes, and my boxes have been in service for years and years and never fail. Yeah, the reason that he would say what Russ said is it's like a primer is because it just doesn't put as much paint when they spray them. You don't get that layer of paint like you do when you do a roller or a brush. Um, Especially the corners are the most vulnerable place. But I would tell you that you'd really be well served to put a coat of paint on the bottom board because it takes the most moisture and it's going to be the first thing to fall apart.
That's very helpful. Thank you. So I will. I was thinking that they needed to be painted again, but honestly, when I watched your lesson, I was like, I don't have that working space, so I got to figure that out. And then the other thing is that they come with the plastic dipped in wax, and I assume, you know, after hearing your lesson, that the bees won't build it out, and in the first year, that's not okay. You need like wax on the inside. Where do I buy that?
Yeah, you can go to YouTube or YouTube. You can go to Amazon and buy wax, beeswax from them. Or if you belong to a beekeeping club, just ask around. Somebody probably has tons of wax. In
Yeah,
fact, if
I'm
you
gonna
sit
try and go to the
in
meeting
just like
tomorrow.
yeah, if you ask, somebody should have some available for you. And I would wax those frames. And if you saw the lesson, what it said is wax the ribs, not the bottoms. And you don't need to flood them, unlike people show. I mean, I don't know. There's different schools of thought. Some people think you really need to coat them, and others say, as long as it's a reasonable layer of wax on the edges, the bees will build them out. I'm about to release, I created a new lesson to put in called Wonky Comb, and it has to do with plastic and the constant stream of messages. If you belong to the Beginner's Beekeeper course on Facebook, about people saying, why don't they build my comb, and all the reasons why they don't. And it'll have some insight on how to do it. But, you know, if you can wax them before you put them in, that would be great. It'd be really to your advantage. We've had beekeepers in the program say, I already bought my frames. They're all plastic. They worked through half the season and the plastic didn't work for them. And they tried and tried. They even took them out and waxed them. And then at some point they gave up and went and put wax foundation in. And within 2 weeks, they built the whole thing out. So if for some reason it fails, fall back to plastic or to wax. I am fighting a losing battle when it comes to plastic foundation. It's pretty much what you have to buy today. If you buy turnkey kits, there is one thing I'm going to tell everybody. If you buy your frames from Manlake, from Dadant, from whatever, and they're pre-manufactured, they're stapled, they're probably fine for years. But eventually, dry, wet conditions inside the colony, those staples are going to free up. And I went in, I have Brushy Mountain frames that I bought that were stapled. And this spring, 4 boxes in a row, I pried the top bar off and the staple pulled out. If you have those frames, take the time to buy nails and put the side nail in like the picture shows, even if they're stapled and pre-built. I promise you, somewhere down the line, you're going to be really happy you did that. Staples are not sufficient. They come out. I don't care what you say. I've had it over and over, season after season. And I didn't know this back in the day. And every once in a while, I pry a frame out. I just did one last weekend. And the top bar separated and the frame fell down through. And I was like, oh, God. So apiary design, hive placement, bare fencing. Anybody have any other questions? Okay.
I have another. I'm sorry. I don't
Yeah,
want
go
to
ahead.
monopolize the questions, but
No,
because I
ask
couldn't
all the
attend
questions
last
you
month,
want.
I have a lot. So I have. It's funny because you even talk about it in your example, like where it's a narrow property. And so I'm thinking of having the bees pretty close to the house, but like on a side of the house we don't use any. I mean, I know it'd be better if they were in the middle of the nowhere, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, when you have some of those challenging property designs, you kind of have to be selective in how you set things up. Consider barriers, like a fence to the side of them if you have to, if on the other
Yeah,
side of them to the edge of your property.
when you
So
say
they'll
a
fly up
flyaway,
and
is there a
over the fence
specific?
and out.
Yeah. Okay, I can do that. We have a fence. It's easy enough to put. Is there a specific mesh that you buy that's like lets the sunlight through? Because I don't want the hives, I want them to make sure they're getting enough sunlight.
Yeah,
Right.
there's,
I can have them south facing.
I've seen people use that deer netting. Do you know what I mean by that?
No,
If you
sorry,
ride
I'm a
around
city
the
girl.
neighborhood, eventually you see some people who are sick of the deer eating all their plants and they put these big posts and they put deer netting out. And the deer netting is almost like fishing line, but it's really thin. And it's sufficient enough to create a barrier, but it's small enough that it does what you said, like lets light through. If you look around, go to Tractor Supply,
Tractor Supply. Yeah.
places,
Okay.
they have that kind of stuff for you.
Thank you.
Mhm. Anybody have problems with bears in their area other than you, Scott?
Yeah, our bears are still hibernating.
Yeah. Did you just get snow? You had a lot of it there, didn't you?
Yeah, we got 26 inches. That's unusual for even for here. Yeah. But such is such. The girls are out though. It's busting 60 degrees all next week, so still about 35 at night. It'll be a while before we're out of it.
Yeah, very similar to what we're having right now. Scott's in Colorado, by the way, everybody. So we have some 60-degree days, but it was down to 27, 28 last week. And so really cold nights. You want to be careful for the second year people about doing spring reversals where you're putting your bees down in the bottom box and close to the front entrance where they're cold at night. If you have a big cluster, chances are you could probably get away with it, especially if you go in there and do your cursory inspection and you find that they have several frames of brood underway, then chances are they're probably have enough momentum that they're okay. I did a reversal of one of my polystyrene hives, but only one big colony, and it's polystyrene equipment which will insulate them. But the rest of my stuff, I left it alone. I'm waiting for this week to come up where the overnight temperatures are 35 to 40 degrees. And in the morning, when it comes time for the sun to come up, it gets to be 45 or so, which is flight weather for the bees. So I look at like Christoph and others who are second year people, don't follow what's going on the internet where people are talking about reversals. Some of them may be as far down as Georgia and North Carolina, and that's the time for them, but not for us up here yet. Be a little conservative I watched a video of somebody last week open their hive, and when they opened it, it was so cold you could hear all the propolis crack as they took it off. And the next day it was going to be really cold for them. And the challenge is the bees can't work with cold propolis to put it back to seal the hive. So all the air, and it's been really windy this spring, all that cold air is blowing through the seams and chilling the bees. So be smart, do your inspections, pay attention to the weather and the temperatures, and only manipulate your bees when it makes sense that they're not going to be harmed by it. If you did break open your colony and look at it and you had several warm days after, they could probably fix it. But if not, yeah, you're kind of punishing them a little bit until we get to the warmer stretch and they get past this.
Hey, Kevin, I put in the chat that one of the other things if people are getting new boxes is those little metal rails to protect the ridges. Those are awesome. I mean, they're like 10 cents a piece.
Yeah.
And I've had so much good luck with them when I'm popping up my frames rather than sticking wood to wood. That metal is, and it's much easier to clean off. They're worth their weight in gold.
Yeah, it's a good point, Scott, that one of the things we recommend is you be very careful on the type that you choose. There's some people who've gotten creative and created different form factors for those frame rest metal protectors. they make them with profiles and stuff so that it gets the frame up off the rabbet. But unfortunately, it pushes the frame up and it changes the space from the top of the bar to the one that sits over top of it. Try and buy the 90-degree flat metal ones and keep the spacing of your equipment from the box to the way the frames hang as the manufacturer intended them. Be careful with some of those ones that you buy that have some sort of ridge profile that goes up. It does work to keep the frames up and creates less of a space for the propolis to come in contact, but it also does change the dynamic of bee space. And I'm with you, Scott. I have them in all of my hives, and I have a funny story to tell. Is one time I brought a box to somebody and it was the only box I had and it didn't have those in it. And the commercial beekeeper who was giving me bees says, "How come you don't have a metal bar in there?" I was embarrassed. How come you don't have one of these metal protectors? I kind of laughed at getting caught. So, all right, I'll just keep pausing to make sure that if you have a question, you can ask. Okay, I want to talk about second year program. For those of you who are in the second year, and this might be interest to some of you new, there's introduction to splits, why you want to make them, what you could benefit from them, how to do them. And then I give you a couple ideas of traditional splits, walk-away splits, and what a Desmarais method is. Somewhere in your beekeeping career, you're going to hear this thing and wonder what it is. And one of the challenges out in the interwebs is that the original Desmarais method as presented by Mr. Desmarais back in the 1800s was different from what's performed today. It's evolved because his original method worked, but it didn't work all the time. And beekeepers have elaborated the process for swarm control to have different instructions set. And so out on the internet, people describing it, they generally don't get the basics right. And so there's the Desmarais method, which you might want to peek at if you're trying to figure out swarm control. The one thing that I want to say to second year beekeepers is I'm not encouraging you to do Desmarais, but if you find yourself opening your box and you find capped or in progress swarm cells, they're making queens, and you say, what do I need to do? One of the better approaches is to look at what the Desmarais has to offer. And so you should know it just to have it in your arsenal. So when you encounter capped swarm cells, you might say, well, you know what, this might be a good opportunity to do a Desmarais. And when you go through the lesson, you'll find out that you separate the swarm cells from the colony, and then you decide whether you're going to tear them down or whether you're going to use them to raise a new queen and so on. So when you go through the lesson, you'll get what the permutations are and how that can benefit you to get you out of the jam that you're in. The other thing that's in there, and even a first year person might be interested in just letting you know it's there. Most people, when they first start, they order their bees. Every once in a while, we have people come in through the program that got their bees through capturing a swarm. Neighbor called, they got a swarm, they went and got a box, and they put bees, and then they come to the program and go, what am I supposed to do? It is a way to get started. Some people go and build all their equipment and then try to get on a swarm list, and they go and capture their swarm, and that's how they get their bees. They don't order them through a package or a nuke. There's a lesson there on capturing swarms and swarm traps. So if that's an interest to anybody in the call, feel free to go take a peek at March end lessons for year 2. And then if you're a current beekeeper, which some of you are, you know, even the best beekeepers that do all kinds of swarm management still have some getaway. And we would encourage you to set out swarm traps on your property so that if the bees move out, maybe they'll move right into your equipment. That's in that lesson too. So any second year question about splits or any of that I just talked about? Okay. I wanted to say that tomorrow night is Northwest New Jersey Beekeepers meeting. I know there's a couple of you that are part of our club. And then coming up, watch the NWNJBA website. There'll be a live session at our mentoring yard. And we'll be doing live bees with the mentoring hives. And if you want to get a hands-on, we rip and tear those hives apart to show you everything you ever want to know. And even if you haven't put your bees in your box yet, it's so great to come out and work with live bees. We do package install demonstration. And so if you're doing a package install, most of the time we get our packages from the same people you do. And we go pick up the packages and install them that day. And then you could watch us do it and go home and install it in your place that night. So feel free to come join us. I say this kind of quietly because it's a small group. If you're in the vicinity of New Jersey and you want to come out to the Valley Crest yard, we wouldn't kick you out if you showed up. We try not to make it like super crazy in advertising to all of New Jersey, but since you're in this program, we'd be happy to help you and, you know, come on out and do live bees with us. I won't hold you. If you don't have questions, I can let you get on to your business. Is there anything else anybody wants to talk about?
Hey, Kevin, I'll ask a question since there's dead air. I haven't been in, I've been in the top of my real strong hive. Like for everyone's benefit, I did lose a hive last year. I got a mite bomb in the spring that just decimated, you know, one of my hives. But the other one's going gangbusters. I'm keeping some sugar on top to feed them throughout the winter. We don't plant anything here before Mother's Day, so winter does last a while. I'm never really sure what it's going to be, but I do keep an eye on the weather. But
Where are you, Jason? I don't know.
oh no, this is Scott in Colorado.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I saw Jason's hand up and just thought it was. Yeah,
check.
go ahead, Scott.
So what I'm hearing people talk about is they've already got, you know, we've had some warm days, so and pollen's come in there. We've got tons of tree pollen. It's a real pretty like olive drab green, either from juniper or elm. I guess some maple is starting as well. So they're getting the protein. I'm curious is that, you know, it's a race against the clock to get the brood started versus when it's warm enough that I can crack and do a full inspection, that I may find that they've got all their bags packed and are ready to head out. I'll get swarm traps up here probably in the next week or two, and my yellow jacket traps as well. But I just, you know, wondered if that's sort of an annual thing that I've got to worry about them getting too far ahead. Now they're in 2 full deeps. So they had a ton of resources going into the winter. So I'm not too concerned about them as far as space goes. But I guess we'll see when we pop the top.
Yeah, so let's talk about what you likely will find, being where you are. Our bees in the Mid-Atlantic region the queen will start laying a moderate amount, small to moderate amount of brood in January and February. And then especially in those days in March where it warms up and the bees go out and forage. When the bees go out and first start pulling in pollen, you will see food available to them, and they need to have that pollen to create the brood food to feed the young larvae. And so if you're watching sporadic here and there forage, then you can imagine that they're starting to brood up. But when you get those 2, 3, 4 days in a row, you're going to start to see multiple frames of brood. And you just want to make sure that you have a game plan that if you pop the top, when you finally get that break in weather, that if it's a big colony, you know what you're going to do with it right away. Pre-plan your work. Chances are you'll probably find a moderate colony. You can do a hive reversal, situate everything down in the bottom, make sure you don't split your brood in half, that they're not so big that so first off, they probably work their way up into the top box through winter. They're sitting underneath the inner cover. they're probably not going to starve because if they have flying days and you have pollen coming in, there's also nectar available to them. And you just wait till you get that seasonable weather where you can go and assess. And then once you assess, you can move them down in the bottom box or let them push their way down and just stay ahead of them. You're looking for indicators of swarm from the presentation, swarm indicators that they're backfilling the brood nest, that you start to see white wax and drones. Those things are a sign that it's game on, but up until that time, you can kind of just read the lay of the land of the colony and then stay ahead of them from that standpoint. I think you have time, Scott, honestly, to wait and get in. You haven't physically cracked the top, have you?
No, I've not been down into the brood box. I've got like I said, just a pan of some sugar cake that's on the
Are
inner
they taking
cover.
it?
Yeah, actually they are. They've
Okay.
kind of been noshing on it all winter. So
If you're getting 60-degree days, they have plenty of flying weather. So, and they'll be able to go out and find stuff. So you don't be under surprised. They're building brood. They're ready to go.
no,
And
I
their
know
season's
that.
gonna break
That's
like April 15th, April 30th there. So come the first week of April, you need to make sure you're in and have a plan for them.
yeah, we're getting 3-4 days above 50 and mid 50s, and then a day of 35, then 4 more days of 50, and then a couple days in the 20s, and then another day. It's just
Yeah, so okay.
it's climbing, but it's sporadic.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, and just shoot a note off if you have any questions and we'll try to settle you. I'll turn to Jason now.
We'll do.
And I see you, Christoph. I'll come to you in a moment. Jason.
So my question for you, I'm kind of going against your advice. I have been using the black plastic foundation in my
Mhm.
hives, and actually haven't really had any problems with that. The bees have built that out pretty good. I'm in a situation where I'm kind of starting over this year, and I have a bunch of old frames, that have that old dark crusty comb on it.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, can I just scrape the comb off and leave the black plastic foundation in, or do I need to replace that foundation on those old frames?
No, in the plastic, you could just take your hive tool and scrape it off if you want to get rid of it. How old is it? How many years? Do you know?
5 or 6 years, probably.
Yeah, you're going to want to get rid of that. Just take every frame, scrape it down to the plastic, melt yourself some wax, clean wax if you can find it. Presumably, if you've been at it that long, then you have some. And do
Mhm.
what I said earlier is make a crayon out of it or make something. There's a video that explains it where you just rub it against the ribs, but you don't melt it and paint it on where it fills all the gap and all of that. You just
Right.
need it on the ribs.
Okay.
And you'll be fine. But you could scrape that all off.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering if I needed to replace the foundation or if I could just keep the old foundation to scrape off the comb, but keep the old plastic foundation.
Yeah, you're fine to keep it. Are they wood frames with plastic in them or are they
Yeah. Yeah,
plastic?
they're wood frames. They just have the plastic foundation.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, some beekeepers are they're like, I'm just going to buy plastic, pop those out and put new in. But I don't, if I were you, I would scrape it off. Why get rid of it? It's perfectly fine. It just needs to be coated.
So related to that, all this old black comb that I scrape off,
Mhm.
what can I do with it? How can I clean that? How can I use that?
Yeah, if you go to, I'm going to give you an address, youtube.com/NWNJBA, Northwest New Jersey Beekeepers. It's on the bottom of my tag.
Okay.
And look up simple solar wax melter.
Okay.
Look at that. It's a really cheap, inexpensive way to melt your wax. And I just, wintertime, I do a lot of that stuff. I just melted all my old brood comb. I have pounds and pounds of wax. And then afterwards, you can use it for a number of things. I make fire starters and other things out of it. So if you look there, you'll find a really cheap, inexpensive way to build a solar wax melter, and you can melt all that down.
So, is there a way to filter out all the impurities? Because I mean, like I said, it's that old dark crusty.
Yeah, I don't know that
cone.
I'd want to use it for anything. First off, it's probably it's got treatment in it if you've been doing treatments, and it's got
Right.
pesticide in it that the bees brought back. And so I wouldn't use it for cosmetics, and I wouldn't put it back into the colony. I would use it for like fire starters and things where, you know, you're going to burn it or get rid of it. Some people use it for industrial use and other things. I don't know that I'd make candles out of it and burn it in your home because you're disseminating all that in your
Right.
house. But you could think of different ways to use wax that would not, you know, put yourself in jeopardy by being exposed to whatever happens to be absorbed in it. But I wouldn't put it back in your colonies.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
It- It's great as a swarm attractant, so you can rub it inside a swarm box.
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, some people melt it and paint the inside of the swarm boxes with it. You know, eventually the new bees will come in contact with it, but it's so incidental and it's probably not that much of a harm.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Christoph?
Yeah, so I opened my second year hive probably I think a couple of weeks ago, and they did survive well. It seems there's a lot of brood and eggs and so forth in the upper box, and not too much in the lower box. There was still a little bit of honey on the outside. So I had also given them some fondant over the winter, which they completely devoured. So I'm kind of curious. You were talking about the reversal. Should I start, moving the brood to the lower box at this point, or will they just do that by themselves? I didn't see any queen cells or swarm cells, or for that matter, even drone cells when I opened them a couple of weeks ago. So it doesn't seem like they're about to swarm. But is there anything I should do other than just let them go at this point?
Yeah, great question. And in the context of understanding how to read the bees, it's one of the more complicated things to understand coming out of winter. And this is where folks who watch Facebook and hear people talking about doing reversals and all that stuff, you can't follow a calendar and you can't follow somebody else's advice. You need to do an inspection and understand the state of your colony and then treat them the way they should be treated based on their position. So let's talk about the possibilities. You have a super small colony. It just made it through. And I can give you examples because I have one of those. It's 2 frames of bees. What I look at is how do colonies come out of winter? They either eke through like this one. And when they make it to March 15th, that's usually the indicator to me that they'll make it. But that colony is in survival mode. It needs to rebuild, it needs to replenish, it needs to get to operational size as best it can. So we'll just put a pin in that. The second colony is the middle of the road colony, 4 or 5 frames of bees. It got through fine. It's not the biggest banging colony, but it's going to trajectory that is going to be really well for spring. They're adequate. And as soon as the weather breaks, they'll be good to go. The farthest one is you open it up, and I have one of these too. There's 6 or 7, 8 seams of bees. You look down in, just pick the top up, look down in, give them a little smoke, and count the seams, how many bees there are. It's a big one, size of a basketball almost. Out of winter, that one, man, it's game on. As soon as the weather breaks, it's going to fill those boxes up. It's probably been building brood since February. It has 3 or 4 frames of brood that's in progress or already capped, that's a promissory note that it's going to have a population explosion. So now you know you have three classes of bees: the runt, the middle of the road, and the banging one. The runt, best thing you could do is just keep it going. Don't interfere with it. Don't put it in the bottom box because they'll get chilled by the air coming through the front entrance. Leave them alone. Make sure they have enough food. And when their weather breaks, you can stimulatively feed them to give them a head start, or you can go over to your banging colony and pull a frame out to take a little out of them and add it to the runt colony to give them a little bit of a boost. But ideally, that one, you're just going to let it run its own course and recover to the best of its ability. It's 2 frames. It made it through winter. It will, you'll be surprised how fast they catch up, grow as soon as the colony breaks, the weather breaks, and then it'll come to full fruition. Maybe it'll swarm even if it can find its mojo, but later in the season. But you have no concerns about swarming for that runty colony. It's just trying to get back to operational state. The middle of the road one, you have to judge how many frames of brood do they have in progress and whether they're making drones. And if you see white wax. So let me explain what those indicators are. Drones indicates the season's ready, that they can make virgin queens and have the queens go out and get mated, and there's a drone to mate with. That's a precursor to swarming. White wax means there's enough new bees of the proper age that their wax glands are developed and they have plenty of food, because they need food in order for the wax gland to develop on the abdomen. And so if a colony is mid-size, they have plenty of bees, they have bees being the brood is fully developed and they have the resources they need to feed all that brood, you'll start to see little deposits of white wax all over the top of your frames and in and around, and any white wax in places where they need to build. You know that colony is there. That colony is ready to go. That's the one you can do the reversal. You can put the boxes on top. Come April 1st, you're going to put honey supers on them, and you want to stay progressive and ahead of that colony. The banging hive, the one that's full grown coming out of winter, 6, 7, 8 frames. You need to do that one soon. Put it in the bottom, add second boxes, maybe perform a split to keep them from swarming. Pay attention to swarm cells. And because if they have 2 to 3 to 4 frames of brood already in progress, they're going to triple their population in short order. And come April 1st, when the trees start to break, and by April 15th, when it's full blown, that colony is going to put honey supers on 2, 3 a day. I'm being silly, but they're really going to go. So read your colony in your first inspection and figure out which one of those they are, and then kind of develop your game plan as to how much momentum and energy the colony has to get to a swarm state. It's low in the runt. It's promissory note in the middle one, and it's a foregone conclusion in the big one. And if you could use that kind of mental gauge for it, Christoph, you can figure out what would be the best way to go when you look in on what they have going on, and look for those indicators that I talked about. Drones, white wax, are they storing nectar on the brood frames? All of those things mean that they're serious about getting their situation going. I'll ask Bob and or Russ if you guys want to add anything to that. See, Bob's good.
How could I add anything to a 10-minute long answer?
You're welcome. If you haven't been able to tell, Russ is a little cheeky sometimes. We love him for that. Okay.
I just have one other quick question.
Yep, go ahead.
I have a few frames that I was using wax frames, wax foundation, and there are a couple of frames that have like big holes in them. I'm not sure exactly what caused it, but is this a good time to just replace them, or should I replace them with just new frames? They're mostly on the outside of,
on the edges.
Yeah.
So 2 things occur. There's times when the bees need wax and they don't have bees that make wax at that time. And so if you have wax frames, they'll steal it from the frame and you relocate it to somewhere else. The other thing that happens is sometimes they chew those holes on so that they don't have to go up and over and down to get to the other side. They just chew a hole and they go through. So when you look at it, sometimes they've created purpose-built runways horizontally through the comb, and other times it's they've stolen the wax. One thing that I'll say to you is a lot of times if you leave those frames in and they stole the wax, you'd be surprised they'll come in and build them back through, or they'll just leave them and say that's the way it's supposed to be and it's not a concern.
Right.
This is the time, and I'll say this for everybody. When you have a hive coming out of winter that occupied 2 nest boxes and they're up and underneath the inner cover, and you're situating your hive for spring, that means they're only occupying 6 to 8 frames usually. That gives you 12 frames that they're not occupying to evaluate and discern whether this is a crappy frame, I don't like the way it's built, or it has problems, I'm going to get it out of there. It's the perfect time to move out all of your bad comb. When you're in fall and the bees are retracting and coming down to the lower box, one of the things you could do too, keep this in the back of your mind, is take your bad frames and rotate them out to the outside during the fall season in the lower box. And when spring comes and they're up underneath, those are the first ones that you could pull out because the bees won't be using them. So always rotate your bad frames to the outside as much as you can. And then come spring, it's your opportunity to get them out. Cut them out, get rid of them, put a new one in, and get them to build it out properly. So you have to look at that, Christoph. If it's all the way down the sidebar, usually it's because they stole it. If it's just a hole here or there, like oblong holes,
Right.
the size of a finger or whatever, it's usually a pathway. That's my finding.
Right. No, it's more like all the way along one of the edges, you know, like almost like a couple of inches wide, like a strip. No.
Yeah, that's usually a sign of somewhere along the line they didn't have wax and they stole it.
Right.
They chew it off.
Put it back in, let them do what they want to do with it.
Yeah. They don't like open holes like that. I mean, they don't mind the pathways, but they don't want big open spaces. And a lot of times you'll see they'll close it in. So
Right.
all right, turn it to Vanessa.
Hi there. Sorry, going back to a first year question around water supply. I had an idea about putting in a rain barrel and within a slow drip system
Mhm.
for them. How are bees going to be very picky about their water if it comes from a rain barrel? They're going to kind of turn their little antenna up at it, or are they going to
No,
say, "Hey,
no.
there's
In
always water
fact,
here. We love it."
the funny thing is they don't love clean water. They don't love clean water. No, this is going to gross you out, but they'd rather go drink the water off of a cow potty than drink your clean water because they can smell it and they don't care. So
Okay.
if you have rainwater, and
Mhm.
even we recommend, and thank you for saying this because it's the perfect time. If you're setting up a colony for the first time, you want to set water up right away from your bees, especially if you have neighbors with pools. You want a water source between your hive and the pool so that they find your water source. And we always recommend you could put a pinch of salt in it. They like the salt. You could put a cap of Clorox bleach for a bucket, and or you can use anise, like anise extract, like vanilla extract, but you buy anise from the store. You want them at your water smell so that they can smell it. As they fly over, they'll smell it and they'll come down to it. If you go to that same YouTube channel, youtube.com/NWNJBA, and look up water, you'll find so many different videos about different water solutions that you can put in your yard. One of the things we often talk about is just a simple 5-gallon with floaties in it. And by floaties, you can put corks, you could put little pieces of wood, you can even recycle the old-fashioned styrofoam chips. You want to drill holes in the top of the bucket all the way around. That sounds odd. But when the water comes up, they reach the holes and the water flows out and it doesn't float up and over the edge and your floaties go out of the bucket. I've seen different people set up like small, what do you call it, like a cat trough or something, and you hang a
That,
net.
well, that was my thought.
Yeah,
Was I was gonna do a rain barrel with a
look, there's a
gravity
couple different
feed.
out there. Gravel is
Yeah.
great. Want to give them something
I-
that they can land on.
Mhm.
They will land on something and walk down into water, but if you don't, they'll drown. They don't like to get their feet wet.
So Vanessa, I took a Tupperware tub and buried it flush to the ground. Okay. And I filled it with peat moss. And I don't have to touch it, but like maybe August, late July, August, I have to put like 4 gallons of water into it. But because it's a large Tupperware tub, it holds the water and they can sit on that peat moss, but it's also, quote, dirty water because it's not fresh and they like it and they go to it constantly. And I have a pool and they don't go to my pool.
Yeah, we put up a pool in the summer as well. The bees will be around the other side of the house, but my thought is like I'm gonna put water like right next door. Like their neighbor is a pool. They're having their own to drink
It's
out of.
funny as we have this conversation and I get asked this question, so I'll answer it. How far do you put your water away from your pool or from your bees? The answer is, I don't know, because we've done both. We put them 100 yards away, but some people don't have 100 yards to put their thing. In our teaching apiary, the water bucket sits 5 foot behind the hive and they use it. So the answer is just put water out in a bunch of different places. And if they latch onto one, make sure you keep that water full all the time. Because once they orient to that spot, they'll communicate to the rest of the colony that that's where the water is and they'll go to it. There's another solution that is often overlooked, which is we don't like Boardman feeders. They're like the mayonnaise jar that you feeder that you put in the entrance. If you put sugar water in a new colony and put those at the entrance, it calls all the other bees in the neighborhood to come and try and get that resource. But if you put water in it, it's water right at the front entrance, and the bees will take advantage of that. So if you have those Boardman feeders, maybe you bought a kit from somewhere and it came with one of those and you say, what am I going to do with this thing? I know I'm not supposed to use it to feed sugar water at the entrance. You can put water in it. I want to talk about something real quick, which is how many here are getting packages? If you're getting packages, you two already know how to do this. It's funny. Think about what you're doing in order to get the hive ready. I said earlier, make sure you paint your boxes ahead of time. One of the things that you want to do is protect your comb, but you also want it to be at the right temperature. So if you're doing wax foundation, which most people don't, but you want to put it out there ahead of time out in the sun. But that even goes for your plastic stuff. Take your colony or your hive equipment and set it up on the stand the day before and let it get to quote unquote room temperature or whatever the outside temperature is. So that when you put the bees in, the temperature is commensurate with the air. That's just one of those small little instructions that sometimes gets overlooked. And so when you go through the lesson, several of those things are in there. Know how you're going to pick up your bees. Understand that there's going to be bees flying around inside your vehicle. Have a plan for that. If you didn't get a chance to go through the lesson, a lot of that is covered, but think the process from I get up in the morning and I'm going to get my bees to bringing the bees back to putting them in the box, all of the things you have to do. Make sure you have blue tape on hand to tape it up. Blue tape is your friend for all kinds of like MacGyver emergencies that you have. Yeah, just because the more prepared you are, the better you feel about like, I know what I'm doing. I have confidence in what I'm doing. And that's really important when you get yourself into beekeeping is the better planned you are, the better the operation goes overall. So I see you figured out how to spell Day Marie. Thank you, Bob. Any other questions? Let me ask just a sidebar. I don't get to ask this very much. How are the lessons? Is there ever times when you look at stuff and say, that doesn't make sense? I didn't understand that. It's too long, it's too short, didn't give me enough detail. I have thick skin. We've been doing this. So I should say that when we built this original program, it was long format designed for our club, and it was taught in a bunch of different seminars. When we got to COVID, we had to switch up the game plan, and we carved it all up into small snackable lessons so that people could take it online. And I don't know, for the most part, the feedback has been positive, but there could be times when things are lost in translation because it got reformatted. And I just want to make sure that, you know, there wasn't anything confusing or the slides are hard to read or anything like that. If you ever have feedback where you find spelling errors or anything like that, please just give us as much feedback as you can on that.
I know I gave a lot of feedback, didn't even get a thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I sent you a thank you. Russell's my biggest editor. I did thank you for that. In fact, you should go back and look at all those lessons. I incorporated all of the feedback you gave me.
Probably giving you a hard time.
I know. See, I told you, everybody. Yes, Vanessa?
I guess some of the earlier lessons were longer. The ones that are under 20 minutes are definitely more digestible. And then
Yeah.
I would also say, and maybe it's that I'm viewing them through the website and not on YouTube, like directly on YouTube, but I would love to be able to download them. And I haven't been able to download them.
If you play the video from our website and you hover over the video, there's a YouTube link on them. In fact, I think I could show you this.
I mean, it's possible. So I spent a lot of time on planes, and I'd love to be able to just watch it there, and it's what I can't do.
Do you know what YouTube downloaders are?
No,
Have you seen those? Hold on.
it's a very me problem. It's not a content problem.
It's okay.
So-
You know, somebody's going to watch this recording and have the same question. You see, this is the lesson here, right? Let me see. Hold on. Share. Helps if I share. You see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. This is the thing. If I click play here, it's playing. If I click here on the YouTube link, it'll take you to YouTube. If you belong to YouTube, you can download it. Thank you for watching. I am. But you can go to youtubedownloader.com or just type in YouTube downloader and add this URL right here. And if you do that, you can download the video to your local computer, and then you could watch it to your heart's content or your phone.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I would need to do.
Yeah,
I will
if you're
try
on
that.
planes, I understand. You kind of have to do it ahead of time, and that's hard to figure out. So. If you ever get stuck, let me know and I'll help you through that. Just send me an email, Kevin at Managed Mentoring or whatever comments, and we'll do that for you.
Okay, so then I have one other question. While I have you and the general trust, I have 2 black dogs. Should I be worried for them? They're going to learn
Yes.
about the spicy
They
beans
They
real
usually
quick.
learn pretty quickly. They come in, they get stung. They either run away with their tail between their legs or they just deal with it. I watched a black lab that belonged to my brother-in-law for like a month. And she would come into the apiary. She gets stung every once in a while, but she just took it off and sat right there, didn't care. So it depends on the critter. They learn pretty quickly to just make sure you don't like bring them into the fenced area and close the fence behind them and they get stuck in there kind of thing.
My new dog, who's black, Australian Shepherd, she used to come behind me until she learned, and now she stays about 30 yards away from the colonies and drops down and stays when I'm working the bees. So she understands that, you know, to stay away at this point in time. So they learn really fast.
Yeah, they usually come in, my experience, even with the cats used to follow me and they come in and they settle. Bees don't move after things that don't move. Every once in a while they spot the eyes and they go get them, but for the most part. Now my cat used to come in and always rub against me and then get stung and get chased out of there all the time. He wasn't smart enough to figure that out, the bee cat. So, but he followed me in all the time. There you go, Russell.
Yeah, what a
Aw.
cutie pie, Russell.
Scott?
Yeah, Kevin, the only thing I was gonna say is, and I'm working on some edits too. I got back in to some of the first year slides. I too appreciate the shorter format. I know you had made a conscious decision to do that and with the podcast as well, by the way, but the shorter ones are great. Again, you can digest them. If I have time, I can watch 2 in a row. As opposed to having to split one that's too long. The only thing that's, and it's not really an emergency, in lesson 53, slide 20, has the narration didn't take. It so it's lesson 53, slide 20. Other than that, again, it's been great. I kind of watch them as I can get to them.
Thanks. So that the lessons are built in a modular fashion. If anything was wrong, lesson 53, slide 20, is that what you said?
Yes, sir.
I can go back and reproduce every individual slide and update them if I have to. That's why, as goofy as it sounds, I always wear the same shirt because I have them handy so I could go back in and redo. So thanks for that. That's what I'm looking for. Because I watch them, but I don't get through all of them 100%. And to the point of the length of them, the first couple ones, I really couldn't avoid making them longer. I regret doing it, but I really had to cover the topic. And I've even thought about splitting them up into smaller segments. Somewhere down the line, when I go back through, I might actually do that, refactor them. But for now, they have to stay a little bit longer. So. Gina?
Yes, first, thank you. I've been looking for this kind of program for a long time, so I've had so many aha moments watching the videos. Can you go over the temperature questions, like with propolis and when to open the hive and when not to? I can't get it straight in my head.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
I'm going to talk in general terms, just general, the general principles. Bees don't fly in, and they don't survive when they get to be about 45 or below. That's general. I've gone out to my hives at 35 degrees and see bees flying off and go, how the heck are you working? But that's what they do. If you have an overnight temperature of 35, 40 degrees, that's the overnight. But as soon as the sun starts to hit the hive and the temperature at the front entrance is somewhere in the zone where the bees can come down and get to the front entrance and move their flight muscles, you'll see them physically like warming up. And if they can get warmed up, they're going to fly. Generally, the talked about temperature is around 45. Now, if you look at race of bees, Carniolian versus Italian versus Russians, some will say they're equipped genetically, predisposition to fly at different temperatures. And the funny thing is, we're in New Jersey, and we talk about, well, don't open your hives until it gets to be this temperature. But if you're in Maine, it doesn't get that temperature until May. And so they open their hives earlier than we do in the mid-Atlantic region. So all that to say, these are rule of thumb. I don't particularly care to open my hives until it gets to be 60 degrees during the day. And you can go in the middle of winter. Let's say it's Christmas Day and you're on your break and you go out and you want to peek in your hives. If you took the roof off and took the inner cover off and smoked them, it's not going to do any like detrimental harm. The hive's going to die. but it does let all the heat out of the colony. It breaks a propolis seal, and it does set them back quite a bit. And so generally, if you have no reason to be in your colonies early in the season, then don't open them. And so why do you need to go into the colony? Mostly for swarm prevention. And depending on where you are, like the Mid-Atlantic region, if you're down in Maryland where Russ is, or a little further south, they're starting to see this come. He's got days where 70, 75 degrees, especially down in Georgia and so on. But in New Jersey, we're not here yet. New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania, even north of us. So you want to wait until generally the temperatures in the overnight are 40 and above. When they're 40 and above, if you look at the calendar of average temperatures, that's all of April. It doesn't get to be standard 45 degrees or higher till the end of April in New Jersey, for example. So 40 and above means that at the time the sun hits the front of the hive, it's 45 or above, and it could get warm enough for the bees to fly. When it's 45 at that time, it's usually 60 to 65, and you can go in and do all of your cursory looks for your established colonies in the day. Now, like my father used to say, when you used to pay for phone service, state your business and get off the phone. You want to know what you're looking for. You want to take the roof off the hive, give them smoke, take your assessment, but you don't want to be ripping your colony apart. Now, every once in a while, you get one of those 70, 75 oddball days. You could spend a little more time, but still remember, it's 75. It's not 80 or 90. They operate their brood nest at 95 or higher. So as you keep that hive open and you're pulling all that brood up into the 60-degree day, inspected frames, you're chilling it. The only thing that's keeping them warm are the bees that are on the face. And so be conservative. Keep the hive closed until it gets to those signs that I talked about earlier, where you see large population, drones, start of queen cups, you see white wax, then it's time for you to be doing your stuff. But by that time, temperature is probably good to go. So again, Bob or Russ, you guys want to add any other words of wisdom? I'd be happy to take it.
No, I think you nailed that one.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've been in my hives one weekend. There were 3 60-degree days. I picked the first one and I just pulled the roof off and I looked. And like I said, I have a polystyrene hive, which is insulated, and it has the 3rd level colony. It's a big one. I put it in the bottom box because I know I'm not going to get in that box until the beginning of April. And I want to give them the ability to understand they have room to grow and not start thinking swarm. So that's the only box. Now, I had a other polystyrene box that I did an inspection on, and I made it, oops. I left an extra box on top, and all the heat was in the upper box, which they never used. And the colony dwindled to a small, it was moderate, maybe even small. And so that box I didn't reverse. I said, sorry, and I took the extra box off the top that I forgot, and I closed the thing up, and you know, they'll have to recover from my mistake. So
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. I want to just say one last thing is, if you're getting nucleus boxes, make sure that when you have the conversation with your vendor that you understand what they did with the box. Is it an overwintered nuke, or is it a hive that they split off and supplied a queen? Understand the details of the equipment you're getting and how it's been filled. And if you're getting a nuke and you're putting it in your box, if it's an established queen that overwintered, it would be different than you're getting a package of bees with a new queen that they have to coalesce first. One of them is going to take off right away and start building the full box for you, and the other one's going to be a little slower. So if you're starting with a nuke this year, ask your provider, was it treated? Is it an overwintered nuke? And all of those things, so that as you're trying to project how fast they're going to move, make sure that you have some of that background information. We'll talk about in the next lessons progressing your box from I just installed my bees to first box is full, and some of the things you do just as it's getting full before you move to put your second box on the top. So make sure you stay with us and come back for that, because that's an important thing to grasp. I want to say right now, just to lock it in your brain, that one of the most important things for a successful colony operation is that they have 10 full frames of bees and 10 full frames of comb to work with, high quality comb. So many times you see these pictures on Facebook of first year beekeepers and their outer frames are terrible. If you have a 10 frame box and only 7 of the frames are viable, that's 30% of their capacity that they can't take advantage of. So it's really important when you install your bees to make sure your maintenance in the first part of the year is correct, so that they build 10 frames in that bottom box before you move them up into the second one. Just looking at the time and making sure that we're not going too long. Bob and Russ, anything that I should be telling folks this time of year?
I would just state that if you're getting information off of Managed Mentoring, you are getting solid beekeeping information that you can count on. So if you're comparing anything that Kevin's telling you compared to something that you found on like YouTube, pay attention to Kevin. He knows somewhat. Hard time. He knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, look, this is, I say this over and over again, but I really do mean it. We watch new beekeepers come in and they struggle, and there's no reason to struggle. We know season after season for over a decade of training new beekeepers what problems lay in your way. And we're trying to tell you ahead of time. Take the time and watch the lessons. I know sometimes it's a slog. It just comes with the territory, but you'll find that you'll talk to other beekeepers who struggle as you go through your journey. You'll introduce yourself and you'll get to talk, and they'll say, I had this happen and happen. And you go, oh, I knew about that. I didn't get that. I knew about that, because we try to really go out of our way to make sure that the things that will trip you up, of ahead of time, and you don't encounter that. And as you get to know beekeepers through your trajectory of becoming a beekeeper, you're going to find, I don't know, Scott, how did you make out this year with talking to people? Did people struggle that didn't have a program? Not to put you on the spot. But...
No, we're well, I'm still doing the Hives for Heroes in Colorado, although it is national, but we've started kind of because there's so few mentors, we've gotten some of the young and newbie beekeepers together just to kind of commiserate and ask questions of each other. And no, actually, I mean, I haven't heard, a lot of stories of, people that were, greatly wiped out. I know one guy's got 5 hives and he only lost 1. So no, I mean, again, I don't have much to compare it to, but I would say it was a decent year, well within the 10 to 15% loss rate that we talk about.
Yeah, I did a beginner's beekeeper course about 3-4 weeks ago in Berks County, Pennsylvania, and just listening to the audience and the questions they had, especially the second year beekeepers who were back to try it again because they didn't get through the first year. A lot of them, when they asked the questions, you could tell that they struggled here and there with different things that were preventable. So hopefully in time you'll come to appreciate having an inside job, so to speak, of somebody telling you the things to look out for. So
yeah, just to follow up on what Russ said, there's a lot of different ways to keep bees, and there's different ways to do things. What this program is trying to do is to tell you a specific way so that you can be successful. And then once you get through your first year or so, you can go out and experiment and try other ways, and that's what beekeeping is all about, and find out what you like to do. But what Kevin is going to tell you is a good solid way so that you're successful. Because there's nothing worse than getting through that first winter and having all your bees die. And no matter how many times, how long you've been keeping bees, when you lose bees, that you get that same feeling in the pit of your stomach. So
Yeah.
this is the way to be successful early on in your career.
Yeah, and everything we tell you is aligned with the way that the state of New Jersey is trying to promote beekeeping. I've met with the state apiarists, previous and current, and explained to them the different things in the program and reviewed the instruction with them, and there's no challenges. And to the point of Colorado and North Carolina and Maryland and others, Kentucky, Omaha, Nebraska, there's many different programs using the content, and I'm constantly connecting with those clubs that are using it and asking them for feedback. And so far, there hasn't been any red flags on the instructions. So I don't want to hold everybody, but again, I'm really happy to answer any questions. And in between the meetings, not likely that you're going to encounter something, but if something comes up, questions at BK Corner or Managed Mentoring or whatever, you see the way to reach out to us. I look at the email try to every day just to do it. Occasionally we get questions and I shoot back notes. So my preference would be wait till the online session, but if it can't wait, know that we'll answer your question in between the gaps. So, okay. We will see you first thing in April. Hopefully you're on a good path. I'm looking forward to some nice weather to get out in the garage and do some beekeeping stuff and get out into the bees, and hopefully you are too. And thanks for coming out. I do appreciate, I know how hard it is to find windows of time to participate in this stuff. And, thanks for supporting the program, and we'll see you in early April, I guess. Look for the announcements and we'll be happy to help you out. Hi, Vanessa's daughter.
This is Charlotte. She's excited. Yes.
Charlotte. All right, everybody. Thank you.
Good night, all. Bye bye.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Yeah.
Gonna stop the recording.